So, Jane, in what ways did Susie's journey, facing all the challenges that she did with society's definition of what they thought will be something that they can keep her inside a box with her limits that they thought will stay forever? What do you believe not just inspired her journey to face those challenges head on, but kind of unpack that for the audience, a little bit of background of what Susie had to go through?
Yeah. Thank you again for allowing me to share this amazing story. Um, as I said before, Susie was born with many, many problems, and the doctors had told us, with some of the most renowned pediatric neurologists, that she would never walk, talk, learn, or have any kind of independent life. They pretty much told us to look for a residential placement for her. I had a 2.5-year-old toddler at home, a husband. I was so young. I had a life. Well, I didn't know what that meant, and I didn't know what we were going to do, but I knew I had two choices. I could buy lots of stock in Kleenex and cry for the rest of my life, or begin to fight. And again, I didn't know what that meant, because how do you begin to fight? There was no Google. I couldn't go to the internet and look for solutions. But we began by finding an infant stimulation program very early on for her, which taught me how to provide the therapy and stimulation that she needed. And Susie is an amazing individual. Even in infancy, she just was a fighter. She had this will to achieve, and it was never it was just never she never allowed herself to give up, and we continued to fight along with her. As I said, my older daughter was 2.5 years old, and Susie always seemed to know what she should be doing, whether it was playing school or playing store or playing dolls, but her body just wouldn't allow her to do it. All her milestones were late, but we would go back to the doctor. She didn't walk till she was about 4 years old, but she walked. She didn't sit till she was about a year old. She certainly, her speech was unintelligible. I could understand her. We had our own foreign language, but the bottom line is that she was accomplishing milestones and feats that no one ever expected. In fact, quite frankly, they were astonished because they knew what the brain dysfunction was. And the only reason, in my opinion, that she accomplished what she did was her tenacity, her strength, her courage, and her desire to achieve. Um, we continued with infant stimulation, with rehabilitation, with lots of therapies. My older daughter was probably her first and greatest therapist, in that she incorporated Susie in all the play. And Susie learned a lot. She had a lot of language stimulation and motor stimulation. And it was really beautiful to see her older sister, who was a little girl herself, but her greatest teacher. We continued on, and again, she is made a difference for so many people in this life, just by being as sweet and kind and loving. And honestly, she doesn't know how to lie. She doesn't know guile. She doesn't know how to manipulate. That's higher level thinking. you know, she is just sincere and pure. And I've coined this phrase, the Susie effect, because once you meet her, you really feel like you've been touched by an angel. She continued to she would go to school. She was in a self-contained classroom for a while, and then we tried mainstreaming, but that was just too hard for her. She was included, but she was never really incorporated. And that's when we decided to send her to a special school where she's shown. She was a prom queen. She ran for treasurer of her class, and her slogan was "Wrote for the honey with your money." She stood in front of 200 special ed students and made this wonderful speech. And again, this never would have happened in a mainstream school for her. She just she developed, she was just a princess, in her environment. After achieving so many, many, many milestones, and thinking at age 24, when she graduated school, she would go on and live in a supervised living program. We found out, and it was mother's intuition, the doctors thought that I was being a little obsessive. We found out that she was in end-stage kidney failure. And what makes her story most remarkable, it wasn't only her special needs, it was all her medical problems that she had. Do you want me to stop now, or just
Oh,
keep?
you're good. If I could jump in real fast. So once again, let's not refocus radio talking to our guest today, Jane Fischer, talking about her daughter and the story from the book that is available right now. If You Knew Suzy. Definitely, I want you to continue with that story. Go ahead and pick up where you left off.
Okay. So as I said, what makes her story so unique, it wasn't just her special needs and all she accomplished and her wonderful personality. It was then the next chapter of her life, which was probably the most challenging. The only thing that made sense was I gave her life and I was going to give her my kidney. She was so sick. By the time we found out, she only had 12% kidney function. And when you went through the test, they found out that she was blood type O. O is the universal donor, but O can only get from O. And I was type A. So that was devastating, and that I could not give her my kidney. And her father, of course, who was type O, had 8 kidney stones. He had a history of kidney stones, so they weren't even going to touch him. So she was in the wrong line wherever we looked. She was just, we just realized that we would have to get her on lists and find a cadaveric kidney for her, which is very, very difficult. And not only have I become an advocate for special needs, but I've become an advocate for organ donation as well. Finally, I mean, she was becoming sicker and sicker. She had to go on dialysis, which was very difficult for her. But again, she would walk into the dialysis center. Now, don't forget, most people on dialysis are much older. Here's this 24-year-old young lady with special needs walk into the dialysis. Hi, Sadie. Hi, Sam. How you doing? Do you want me to sit next to you? It'll be my pleasure. She's like the breath of fresh air, and she became everybody's sweetheart in the dialysis center, as well as outside. And anyway, in December of 1999, we did get that call that there was a kidney for her, but it was a 63-year-old woman. And my first instinct was to say, well, she's 24 years old. How do you put a 60-year-old kidney into a 24-year-old? And the doctor said, you know what? She's got to get off dialysis. She's not going to be able to survive much longer. So needless to say, she went forward with kidney transplant. And it lasted about 13 years. But she had a host of medical problems. She went in with just kidney failure. But from all the immunosuppressive drugs that you have to take, she wound up with diabetes and hypertension and osteopenia and many infections, a whole host of problems. But throughout this for years and years and years, she's remained the eternal optimist. The kidney lasted till 2013, when we found out that she needed another kidney. The transplanted kidney was failing. So in July 2013, we went for another transplant. And what I need to tell you is, in between the 2 kidney transplants, she was diagnosed with thyroid cancer. So she had to have a total thyroidectomy. And I tell you all this because she is such an inspiration. I have seen her melt the hardest of hearts. I've seen her talk to doctors who barely look at her because they don't think she'll understand anything. And then she'll ask them a question that they'll turn to me and say, my Harvard graduates don't ask those kinds of questions, And she just has a way of maybe I used to think people felt sorry for her, but it's not pity, it's awe. People are just in awe of this incredible human being who's somewhat celestial. You know, like I say, you feel you've been touched by an angel. And if that weren't all enough, about 10 years ago, we had been told, my husband and I went on to have a third child, and we had gone for lots of genetic testing, and we were told that there was no reason to believe that Susie's issues were genetic in nature, that they were just etiology unknown. Anyway, long story short, we went on to have my son, who thank God is fine. But about 10 years ago, I got a call. My brother was a geneticist at University of Pennsylvania Hospital, and we were told that to come right down to Pennsylvania, there was a new syndrome that had been unveiled. And after knowing all of Susie's history, he said, Jay, I think she might have Joubert syndrome. So my husband and I went down, and we both have this very, very, very rare gene. If one parent has it, it's not an issue. Both parents have to have it, and my husband and I both have this very rare gene. Susie is the oldest person in the world who is known to have Joubert's. There could be other people, but it's such a new, it's only been identified, over very few years. So they're watching her very carefully. And I feel that at so many levels, her story has to be told, because not only what she accomplished in terms of overcoming her challenges, not only has she had 2 kidney transplants, but she is a rare genome. And my hope is that we can help other people. I hope that we can be a resource and a plethora of information, and anyone who's facing challenges, and it doesn't necessarily have to be challenges that I've mentioned, any kind of challenges. She is proof that you cannot give up. You have to keep fighting. And most important of all, you have to believe. You have to believe that you can do it. And for all those parents and siblings, you are the wind beneath that person's wings, whatever challenges they face. And to know her is to love her. The name of her book is If You Knew Suzy, Pushing Past the Boundaries of Never. It is on Amazon and Barnes & Noble websites. And it's an extraordinary story.
Once again, listen on Refocused Radio. I'm watching this online, talking to our guest, Jane Fischer. Like she said moments ago, you can go get a copy of the book, If You Knew Suzy. One thing I would say is I'm glad I mentioned Warrior in the intro, because definitely hear Warrior for you and Suzy. When you look at the struggles that she had to endure, but like you said, she had insight, if you will.
Yes.
Insight that I would say was unique and that most people would have the ability to have. And the reason why I say that is because sometimes our limits in other people's eyes are actually our advantage to have a superpower, if you will, because we can see things that most people would not be able to see from that perspective. When you look at Suzy and how she was not a quitter, but she was determined to live her life to the best of her ability. What are some things that you learn as a parent about the power of not allowing your circumstance to determine what you're able to do in life?
Yeah, it would be disingenuous of me to tell you that it doesn't affect a family. A problem like this certainly does affect a family, but it also separates the men from the boys. It was very difficult. I tried to give I think I gave my other children a lot of attention, but I'm sure if you ask them, they'll tell you there were times they felt that Suzy was my focal point, and I think the person that probably, and this is very important for, it affects a marriage. My husband is amazing for having stayed with me because, again, you have to accept the fact that you kind of, you don't have to accept the fact, but the reality is that she was my commitment in life. She was my focus in life. And there's only 24 hours in a day, and there's only one me, however, having said that, she has really laid the groundwork. I was an elementary school teacher. I went back, I got my teacher of the handicapped. And then I went back and got my master's in education, and I became a learning consultant. So she's shaped my life and given me a voice as well. And it often makes me feel sad that through her travails, I found my voice, and through her hardships. But the reality is, there are no accidents, and this is what we were meant to do for each other. And I found a strength that I never knew I had. For the most part, I was a quiet kind of, um, just kind of peacemaking person, but the lioness in me surfaced. It had to, she needed advocacy in so many situations, and you'll read all about that in the book. You'll read about all our all our battles, and there were many.
When you look through the lens of educators, medical professionals, and social workers, what are some ways, based on your own experience supporting Susie, what are some things that you feel that they can support families better? Obviously, they're tasked to do, you know, difficult jobs,
Mhm.
but you as a parent, you're also tasked with difficult job as well. What some things based on what you learned that they can do better in supporting families?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And it was interesting. I lived it because, as I told you, I became a learning consultant. I was on a child study team, which means I evaluated children. And I don't know if I created IEPs, which are individual educational plans, and I had to decide whether a child was eligible for special education. But I knew what it was like for those parents to sit on the other side of the table and hear this news. And I think what's most important for educators to really understand, and administrators and doctors, understand that this parent is in pain. They're only trying to help their child. And if you disagree with them, if you don't like their style, you have every right. That's your right. But don't be combative. Be compassionate. Understand again that this is a mother and father who are doing the best they can to help their child. And rather than battle with them, support them, understand them. And most important of all, realize that this is the child they are fighting for. And we're all on the same team. I would hope that's why that teacher or doctor or professional of any type is doing what they're doing, and um, I've had more parents say to me, and they came in with boxing gloves on, they came in ready to do battle, but I said, I just reached out, I touched their hand, and I would say, I know you're in pain, and I want to help you. I didn't always agree, but I always understood. And
Key
that,
thing you said about those in those professions to understand what the parent, what they are facing, and in moments they probably feel overwhelmed. And I think that's a key word to press on, understanding, because I think truthfully that until you actually understand a person, you don't listen. You can't pinpoint the things you want to hear so that you can respond based on what you feel is appropriate based on your profession or your opinion. But a lot of times we don't actually listen to hear what is truly being said. If you had one way to help people understand what it's truly like to be in your shoes, what would you hope that they will not just appreciate, but say, you know what, we can do better as a society, whether it's public or professionals who interact with families like you?
Yeah, again, I would say that again, and you use the word choose. Have nobody knows what it's like to raise a child with disabilities or medical problems or emotional. But you don't know what it's like until you walk in those shoes. You might think you do, and too often we judge. We're very judgmental, and I would reframe, step back, refrain from judging, and open up your heart and realize there by the grace of God go I. If you're blessed and you're fortunate to have healthy, well children, it's such a gift. And the one thing I've learned from Suzy and living this journey, you don't realize, but you're so fortunate if if everyone is well in your family and your children are um, they don't have to be A students, you just have to love them, care for them, support them, teach them values, and most important of all, be grateful for your gifts. And don't judge others for any behaviors that you don't agree with.
My last question for you would be, when you reflect on the good and the bad, there's been pain, but there's also been special moments. You shared some earlier about uh, profound questions that you asked the doctor, that the doctor would say, wow, Harvard students wouldn't ask those type of questions.
Yeah.
When you look at those special moments, do they for you help you get through the pain that you had to endure?
Absolutely. I truly believe that Susie was sent to us, from whatever God you believe, a higher power. I truly believe that she has been such blessing. And honestly, while it hurts me so, and you'll read it in the book, and I hope everyone out there will read the book because I think you'll take away a lesson of some sort. But when I see her struggle and I watch her in pain, and yet she maintains this ebullient spirit and this kindness and loving. She worries that she's being a nuisance to the nurses or the doctors. Please forgive me. I don't want to bother you, and she's lying there so ill. So my takeaway is again, you know, I've never, neither Susie nor I are a woe is me kind of person. This is what we were destined to do. And while it just hurts me so to see her struggle the way she does, I also believe that she's made such a difference in this world and helped so many people. And this is our destiny. She's my Jobus. She's she's been sent to us to cherish, to take care of, to nurture, to protect, and to teach. And I can't imagine my life without Susie. And I'm grateful that I was the chosen one to care for her.
Once again, you've been listening to Refocused Radio and watching us online, talking to our guest, Jane Fischer, and about her book that is available. You can get right now, If You Knew Suzy. I would say, like I said in the intro, this is a journey that redefines what's possible when love, faith, and grit come together. It takes not just a good mind, if you will. It takes courage to move and continue to live, because in a lot of ways, anyone can have the right to say, I give up. But the fact that you keep pressing, that's why we have people like you on the show. Because if anybody's watching this and listening to this and feel like whatever they are going through, they feel like it's overwhelming, hopefully this will encourage them that, hey, sometimes you just got to do the best you can. And as long as you do that, that's always going to be good enough. So with that, I'll let you have the last word. If you had anything you want to share with parents who might be facing something different but maybe similar with their child, what would you say to encourage them?
You know your child better than anyone else, and you have to be their advocate. And in our book, If You Knew Suzy, Pushing Past the Boundaries of Never, you will read through every chapter. Even in the good times, there were moments when I was criticized, I was questioned, but I knew my child. And that's not to say you shouldn't listen to professionals. I don't want to, send that message at all. Listen, by all means, listen, but also listen to your gut. Listen to your heart. Listen to, your child better than anyone, and advocate. Don't acquiesce. It's so important. They're depending on you, and will make all the difference whether they succeed or they don't. And read the story. you'll walk away understanding why it's so important to be a crusader and a warrior.
But once again, you get a copy of that book right now. It's available. If You Knew Suzy, get it on Amazon, anywhere you can buy books. Once again, to our guest today, Jane Fischer, I want to say to you, like always, to our guests, thank you.